Be funny if it is. Okay, good morning again. This morning we're going to study from Jeremiah chapter 3. And one of my favorite chapters in the book of Jeremiah. I like chapter 6 too. I like them all. One of my favorite chapters in the book because it talks about, and what we're going to talk about this morning, is failing to learn from our mistakes. And I thought about this. Actually, I was going to talk about something else today. And then yesterday I thought about this, and I decided I would talk about this today. And I thought about it because it was September 11th, and it was the 20th anniversary. And I'm one of those patriotic, sentimental people. I remember when the towers were hit. I remember where I was. I'm one of those people that actually remembers. I was actually speaking in chapel when the towers were struck, and the phone started ringing in the lobby. And one of my teachers who was attending chapel that morning had gotten up and had gone and answered the phone. I was in school in Florida, and he came back and I finished. And he waited when I was done, and we had a prayer. At the end of my lesson, he said, gentlemen, I just got a phone call that the World Trade Center has been struck by an airplane. So we're like, wow. Well, a while later, the phone rang again, and we were just getting ready to start our first class that day, and he came back in and said, guys, everybody might want to go home. He said, the other one just been hit, and it's not an accident. And that's where I was. And my wife was walking. They would go walking every morning, the students' wives, and they came back home because they were walking at the mall, and they were closing the mall down. Because at this point, you don't know what's happening. You just know that something bad is happening. And so they grounded all the flights, I remember. And so everybody ends up at our house. We live closest. And all the students and their families were piled in, and we got the news on, and we're freaking out. We're like, wow, what? And I remember that's the first time you start hearing words like Al-Qaeda and Taliban and jihad. And I started researching that, and this concept of jihad had been around for hundreds of years. Jihad is the concept of war, where they wage war. And what's happening and where we're failing is and there's a song. I don't like the song. I like the words, but I don't like the song. It's called Have You Forgotten by Darryl Worley. It says, have you forgotten? And he wrote that song way back then because we were already forgetting. And now you go ahead 20 years and we've forgotten. And the thing about forgetting something, and look, I'm not talking about in relationships where I believe in forgiving and forgetting. In relationships and things like that where, I wrong you, you wrong me, and we make amends and let's put it behind us and let's move on. It's a fresh start. Right? I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about on a big scale. When you forget your past, you are destined to repeat it. When you don't learn from your mistakes or the mistakes of others, you're going to repeat those things, and you really don't have much of an excuse at that point. I feel like George Bush, I used to love the way he said it. He said, we got a saying down in Texas. You might have it here too. He said, you fooled me once, shame on you. You fooled me twice, you don't get fooled again. That's not how the saying goes, but that's how George Bush said it. He said, no, you fooled me once, shame on you. You fooled me twice, shame on me. Because I should have learned after the first time. There's so many things this applies to. You try to tell people, don't have a sexual relationship with somebody you're not married to. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. And people do it. And you end up with babies that don't have homes. You end up with diseases. You end up with all of these issues and all of these problems. I have a friend that is forever connected to an evil woman because they have a child together because they hooked up one time. One time. And forever stuck with this terrible person in your life. And your child is now exposed to the influence of this terrible person in her life because one time, one night. People don't learn from this. You don't look at that and go, we shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. The list could go on and on and on of all the things, drinking and driving. I had a friend one time, and I told him, I said, boy, go find a couch somewhere. No, I'm gonna go wreck my truck and go to jail. You don't get it. There are times, there are points when you hit a point where, and you gotta have enough sense to know how to do this. You drive. You gotta have enough sense to know how to do that. And over again, you see people go, no, I can drive. You can't walk. How can you drive? And not only do they often end up in jail because you don't realize that you stopped in the middle of the road and the stop sign was here, and the cop saw that and he's thinking, well, that guy been drinking. But you also risk taking the life of somebody else. Look at what a little over a year ago, those girls just on the highway right here by Pier Park, dude from out of state, drunk and just driving in their lane. And he was fine and killed all them little girls in that car, all the teenage girls. Don't we learn from that? Don't you say, I need to learn some limitations. How about just stay at the house if that's what you're gonna do? How about call a cab? They used to do this, and I bet you they would. They would again. I bet you they would. But the police department here used to be, if you called them from a bar and you said you couldn't drive, they'd go pick you up, bring you home. They used to do that. I bet you they would if you would. If somebody would call and say, look, man, I ain't got a buddy here that could drive me home, but it's a bad idea for me to do it. Y'all come get me. We got a guy coming that way. Protect and serve, right? So when I think about that, I think about Jeremiah 3. I think about all the mistakes we make that we don't learn from. I think about watching other people make mistakes and we don't learn from them. I always told my sister, you got an upper hand. We're 9 years apart. You got to watch me get all the beatings and all of the punishments, and you should not make those same mistakes. Or at least learn how to lie better than I did at the time, right? Because the younger siblings get to watch. And they can say, boy, I shouldn't do that. That's not what happened to them when that happened. I'm not doing that. I always tried to say that, I learned from the mistakes of my dad. My kids, I think I utterly failed at it, but my kids made me feel so good the other day. They were at the house, and you know what my daughter said? Man, I used to whip my daughter, man. I mean, I would just really spank her. And she said she cannot remember a single time I ever spanked her. She does not remember. She said, no, I used to spank you all the time. No, you didn't. She does not remember a single time that I spanked her. And I was like, I'm telling you, no, I was like, I'm telling y'all. And they're like, no way. And they started saying, we felt like we had the best childhood. We feel like we were so blessed and so happy. And that made me feel good. But I learned from the mistakes that my dad made. I remember telling my mom at one point, I will never be that. I will never do that stuff. Now, I'm so much like him at the same time, I'm not gonna lie. I see it more every day. There's a song, that same song I mentioned earlier, where he says, am I the only one? He says, well, I've turned into my old man. I see that more every day. Every day I'm like, man, I am just more and more like this guy. But at the same time, so different. Because the mistakes he made, I saw, and I was like, man, I'll never treat my wife like that. I'll never treat my kids like that. And I didn't. Well, Jeremiah 3, you got an interesting situation unfolding here, because more serious than even the World Trade Centers is spiritually when we don't learn from mistakes. And you just start here in chapter 3, and he talks about their corruption. He says, they say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him and become another man's wife, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers, yet return again to me, saith the Lord. He says, they say. There's a saying that if your wife leaves and goes with someone else, it's I guess a man code for them in their society. You can't take her back. That's a bad deal. And he's like, y'all think that's just a terrible thing to take your spouse back after she's, gone and fooled around. Yeah, y'all think that's a terrible thing. He says, but here's what I'm telling you. Here's what I'm telling you. I'll take you back. No matter how much you mess up, I'll take you back. People, we have a hard time, accepting certain things. We have a hard time forgiving. right? We really struggle with forgiveness, but God is not that way. God does not have a hard time with forgiveness. Forgiveness means that there's no debt, there's no strings attached, there's nothing, nobody owes anybody anything. That's what forgiveness means. It means that you've done wrong, but we're gonna be okay, and there's no strings attached to that. You don't have to jump through any hoops to make this better. That's what forgiveness really is. It's God saying, I'm gonna take you back. You're like, God, I want this to be fixed. He's like, fixed. That's how forgiveness works. Otherwise, it's not forgiveness, guys. If you got to perform all of these tricks to be forgiven, that's not forgiveness. That's paying a debt back, right? That's working out, negotiating a deal is what that is. Well, if you do this, then you can come back. Then I'll take you back. Then we'll work it out. If you do this. Well, that's not you forgiving. That's not you accepting me and forgiving me. That's you negotiating with me a return. God doesn't do that. God says, you messed up in the worst way you can possibly mess up, but we'll fix it. All you got to do is say, I want to come back. He said, I'll take you back, saith the Lord. But as he continues to talk about their corruption, he says, lift up your eyes unto the high places, and see where thou hast not been lain with. In the ways hast thou sat for them as the Arabian in the wilderness, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. In other words, what God is saying is when they left him, they quit following his ways, they became adulterous. They're having an affair. They were messing around. And he says, and you didn't just do this once with one person. You did this a lot with a lot of people. He said, you were like the Arabian, like the prostitute, just sitting out there waiting for somebody to come by. You could not wait to mess around on me. You could not wait to hurt me. You could not wait to disobey me. You could not wait to go opposite of what I've been telling you to do. But I'll take you back. Isn't that, like, what kind of God is this? Other gods call on people to, bring vengeance and kill and pillage, and our God calls on us to forgive. Other people's gods call on blood, and our God calls on us to just ask him. and he extends that mercy. So they are completely corrupt. So he says, so here's what I've been doing. Because you are that corrupt, therefore the showers have been withholden. Therefore means based on the fact that you don't act right. The showers have been withholden. There hath been no latter rain. Thou hast a whore's forehead. Thou refusest to be ashamed. The idea of being stubborn. He says, I caused a drought to come on the land as punishment. I was like, well, surely, when these people see that there's a drought, I quit blessing them. Surely it's going to wake them up, and they're going to be like, man, we need to call God. We need God back in our life, right? And he's like, and yet, you're stubborn. You have a whore's forehead. You just put it out there. You're just more determined to not follow me. It's kind of like, I witnessed this one day, and it was one of the worst things I witnessed, man. It kind of was disturbing. I had to go inside. But I witnessed a guy breaking a horse one day. And you come to a point where you're trying to break that horse, and that horse isn't doing what you want to do, that they'll beat that thing. And the idea of beating it into submission. And that horse would not walk. And finally the horse got so stubborn, decided it wasn't going to walk, it laid down. And when that horse laid down, that sucker took that rope and started beating that horse. And that horse got up and moved and laid back down. In other words, it was saying, bring it. I'm gonna keep laying. You keep beating me, and I'm gonna keep taking it. In other words, and finally he said, he started talking about putting that horse down. He's like, I can't break it, I'll put it down. And that horse had become so determined that it was like, well, I guess do what you got to do. But that's these people. I'm trying to beat you into submission, in a manner of speaking, and you're just getting worse. You ever see those kids in school? They get paddled, they get detention, and they act worse after it's over. It's like you are not learning your lesson at all. Verse 4. He says, will thou not from this time cry unto me, my Father? Thou art the God of my youth. He says, shouldn't you be saying, you're the one who determines my path? You're the one who guides my ways? No, not you. Will he reserve his anger forever? That's the question we need to ask in our country, isn't it? Will he reserve his anger forever? Is there never going to be a repercussion to what we're doing? And that's the thing I always try to think about in life is consequences. And there have been a few times I thought about the consequence and I said, it'll be what it'll be. But a lot of times I think about the consequences and I think it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I know it's going to be on the back end of this. I was going to put my hands on the guy one day and I started chasing him. And I decided that we were going to fight, even if he didn't want to. and I got about halfway, and he got a good little head start on me. And he rounds the corner by Dry Ron's store, and he looks back over. And at that point, I realized this is about to have really bad consequences. Like, this is not going to go good for me at all. Yeah, it's going to go bad for him, but it's going to go worse for me in reality. And I started thinking about my family and, jail and all of these things. And I said, you know what? Just forget it. And so I did. I just turned and walked away. Should we not in our country? I mean, is nobody thinking about consequences? What's the end result of this going to be? That this isn't going to end well. And so God is saying, aren't you thinking about the consequences? Will he keep it to the end? Behold, thou hast spoken and done evil things as you could. In other words, every opportunity you have to do something wrong, you do it, not even thinking that this is going to have a bad ending, that nothing good is going to come from this. So he says, let me give you something to consider, starting in verse 6. So we have their corruption, and we have God's chastisement. Now he gives them a consideration. The Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She is gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot. He's telling Jeremiah, Jeremiah, can you believe this? Are you seeing what she's doing to me? Have you seen what my people have become? Can you believe this? I can't help but wonder, God, looking at our country going, can you guys believe this? Have you seen what they've become? Will you look at that? Man, I'm telling you, when you watch the video, it gives you chills of the days just following September 11th, 2001. I mean, watching George Bush out there with that megaphone, and he's giving a speech, and there were no speech writers, bro. He was just saying it. And somebody yelled out in the back of the crowd. They said, we can't hear you. He said, you can't hear me. He said, well, I could hear you. And pretty soon the people that did this is going to hear all of our voices. And man, it gives you chills. And watching that moment where he's standing on top of that rubble with them firefighters and policemen and all of these people. And Congress had gone stand out on the stairs and joined hands in prayer. They all went out there. Democrats and grabbed hands and had a prayer together. Unified country. Everybody. You had professional football players quit the NFL and went join the Marines. I mean, this is going back to some World War II type stuff where after Pearl Harbor happened, dude, you had people lying about their age to try to join to go fight. We wanted to go whoop some behind, right? That's why I love that Toby Keith song. He says, we'll put a boot. And he's that we were ready to do that. The whole country, nobody, not a person. The American flag was everywhere. Fast forward 20 years. 20 years. We're only talking about 20 years here. 20 years. And you got people saying that the American flag disgusts them. What did that woman that writes for the New York Times? She says she couldn't believe when she went to Jersey, they had the American flags in the back of their pickup trucks. It was disgusting. 20 years. That's where we've gone. 20 years. burning the flag. Got a song, I listened to it yesterday. I was playing patriotic music all day yesterday, and he said, they burn that flag. He said, but I don't see anybody burn that flag in front of me. And there's another song we heard also yesterday. He says, you burn that flag, you have a bunch of rednecks coming after you if you do that around here. But that's where we are, 20 years. And just, I'm looking at God here talking to Jeremiah saying, can you believe this? And I can't help but him looking at us and saying, can you believe this? I mean, not only going back to our founding roots, but look at where we were in the 40s and 50s. You know, look at when the church was the fastest growing religious group in the world through the 50s and 60s. The Church of Christ, fastest growing religious group in the world. Look at where we were at that point, and look at where we are now. We're the fastest dying religious group in the world right now. We're closing more doors than any other religious group. And I just can't help but God looking at it going, can you believe this? Are you seeing what's happening here? Verse 7. I said after she had done all these things, turn thou unto me. But she returned not. And here it is. Her treacherous sister Judah saw it. So what God is basically saying, I got Israel and I got Judah, and they're sisters. And Judah's sitting here and she's being the good sister. And I'm dealing with Israel. And Israel's just going out of control, committing sin in every way possible at every opportunity. I mean, just can't wait for something to show up in some way to sin. You ever met people like that? They just can't wait to do something wrong. You know, just like they live for things to not be good. And he says, that's them. He says, and through all this, I said, come back. Just come back. Come home. I always felt bad for the prophet Hosea. I don't know if you ever read the book of Hosea. I always felt bad for him. Hosea was married to a woman named Gomer. And Gomer she was a whore. And Gomer went out and messed around and got pregnant. And God told poor Hosea to take her back home and raise the kid. If you're Hosea, you're like, you want what? Hey, but when Gomer got back home, what did Hosea tell her? Basically, he said, you sleep on the couch and keep your mouth shut. He told her that. He said, you go over there and you shut up. And so he's raising this kid, and they named the kids. It's Lo-Ammi and La-Ruima, and all these names mean interesting things. And so then, don't you know that as soon as the Bible says that woman was able to get moving around again, that she was back out there messing around and got pregnant again for somebody else? And God tells Hosea, take her home, raise the kid. And he said, Hosea, I'm getting you to do this because I want the people to see that that's how I'll take them back. I'll take the people back just like that. And as difficult as that was for Hosea, he understood that he was a type. And God is the antitype, that God will take them back. And so here, God said, after she did all this, I said, come back. But did she come back? Nope. She returned not unto me, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. In other words, you're watching me deal with this. You're watching what's about to happen to these people. You're watching what their wickedness led to. Have we not read the books of what happened to Rome in our country? Do we not remember what happened on September 11th if you don't take the fight to these people? What do you think they're doing over there in Afghanistan right now? Afghanistan is going to become not only the hotbed for the Taliban. You don't think the Taliban is going to play ball with ISIS and ISIS-K? You don't think they're going to play ball with Al-Qaeda? Absolutely. You think that suicide bomber that was a member of ISIS-K made it through the Taliban line by accident to kill those 13 soldiers? No. They working together. See, ISIS broke off from the Taliban and Al-Qaeda because they weren't extreme enough. They weren't blowing enough stuff up. And they're like, look, if y'all don't start blowing stuff up, we're going to start our own group. And they did. But it's not because they disagree ideologically. It's because they weren't aggressive enough. So they're still, somebody said, well, they're going to be busy fighting with each other. No, they're not. They got, my enemy is your enemy, kind of, that thing, your enemy makes you my friend because he's also my enemy, that kind of thing on. So if it's death to America, we'll work together. We'll figure out how to work together. But he goes on, he says, so Judah saw it, and I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away. 722 BC. She was destroyed. The Assyrians came in and left nothing standing. He put her away. I given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. She did not learn. Didn't learn from the mistakes. Didn't learn from the past. Didn't learn. And what you don't learn from, you're destined to do what? You're going to repeat it. It's going to happen again. I'm becoming terrified that this is going to happen again. They're coming back. Why not? And we got an open border right now. You don't think that people can't figure out that if they come up through Mexico, that they're going to walk right on in here? Asylum. Okay, come in. And we got a wide open border right now that these people can walk across. We've already captured numerous terrorists coming across the border recently. How many did we miss? If we caught about 60, how many did we miss? Because we're not catching a whole bunch that are coming through. So now they're getting here. What are they going to do when they're here? Want to rebuild a life for themselves in America? No. Want to blow something up. It's going to happen again. So you keep reading, and he says, and it came to pass through the likeness of her whoredom that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. So in 722 BC, God destroys Israel, and Judah sees this. 93 years later, what happens to Judah? Here comes Nebuchadnezzar, destroying them. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah hath not turned to me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith the Lord. And the Lord said unto me, the backsliding Israel had justified herself more than treacherous Judah. That word feignedly means falsely, by the way, in verse 10. She didn't turn to me with her whole heart. She did it in a pretentious way. It was fake. I used to always get frustrated in church. We talked about this before when you got to wear a tie to serve. Like that made you holy when you put the tie on. And one congregation would keep a bunch of ties and coats in the back. So if you were serving on a table and you came in without a tie and a coat, we got one for you to put on. And I remember one time, the guy was wearing a t-shirt that the elders thought offensive. And so they had clothes. They kept clothes there. And they said, well, go put this on. Cover it up. Just say the closing prayer. That didn't change who that person was because he put on the shirt to cover up the obscene t-shirt. He's still that guy. Right? I mean, we do so many things in such a pretentious way. It's just they were saying, yeah, okay, God, we're with you. All right, fine. You ever arguing with your wife or your husband or even a boss or a coworker, and finally you're like, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, fine. You're going along with it, but you don't want to. You don't agree. You just want to end the argument. You're just ready for it to stop. I'm just tired of talking about, okay, that's it, yeah, sure. We'll do that. Not a problem. Okay, fine. Yep, baby, you're right. Yep. That's what they were doing. He says that wasn't anything serious. He says, but I'm going to tell you this. Who's the better sister here? Well, you go, man, Israel's pretty bad. He says, no, they're the better sister. Well, how is Israel the better sister? I mean, Judah did the same thing. Israel's the better sister because she didn't have anybody to learn from. You had somebody to learn from. Remember that thing? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We're without excuse if it happens again. We're without excuse if this country goes down the drain and we don't try to stand up and do something to stop it. It's just the end result, we're without excuse. You know, I mean, we got nothing to look. You did it once and you saw the outcome. You did it again. Come on, I can't help you. You're gonna keep doing it. I can't fix this for you. You're gonna keep messing it up. You know, we can't keep getting taken back if you're gonna keep doing the same stuff. You know, at some point, this has to stop. And I just wanted to mention that today because, verse 13, we kind of got a condition here. It says, only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. He says, acknowledge that. Just acknowledge that and come back, and we'll be okay. Well, I hope we learn from spiritually. Look, guys, sin has consequences. I hope we learn as a country. You know, if you leave this stuff unchecked, it will happen again. I hope we learn as a society. You wander away from God, and eventually God's vengeance will be unloaded on you. I hope we learn from those things. And in your personal life, think about things you need to learn from. Okay, we'll wrap it up there.
I wasn't trying to cut you off.